Charlie, online kind of editor.
Yes.
Tell us about kind of, what you do.
Okay.
Who are you?
I'm the managing editor for All 4, which you probably refer to as 4OD still, but there we go. So basically, I look after the editorial side of the on-demand proposition from Channel 4. And basically what that means is, under me, I've got like two core teams. One is a commissioning team who are basically buying and acquiring shows, commissioning and acquiring shows that will be exclusive to All 4. But they're also, as I'll come into a minute, they're curating part of the service into channels within All 4. And then I've got a separate team who are platform editors. So they're the people who actually decide what you see when you go on the homepage every single day. And then really one of the differences between the two teams is everyone is a curator in the team, and we really believe in the power of curation, and that's a kind of way to get through this kind of world of abundance that we live in. But the team who look after the platform side are kind of curating according to who the viewer is who's looking at All 4 at that time. So using all the data we know about people and what device they're using, we curate the homepage according to that. And then the commissioners are there responsible for helping build curating channels within All 4. So that's where the channel brand starts to, the curation is based on what the brand wants to do rather than necessarily what the user's expecting from it. Obviously you're trying to make it so that viewers would want to watch the channel, but it's just a slightly different approach where you're curating to someone's else. It's basically personalization versus brand personality in effect. I've been at Channel 4 for 11 years now. Before that I was at the BBC. And my background is actually more in the marketing side of things. So at the BBC, I was a media planner and then became brand manager at Radio 1 for a short period of time. And then when I joined Channel 4, I basically spent the first 8 years in marketing and then slowly moved into the role that I'm in now. So I'm not a program maker, and the kind of thing that I've learned over the last 2 years in this job is that I don't know how to make programs. I've got a team who can do that kind of thing for me. And who've got way more expertise. What I love in life is brands, so I love spending my time building brands. So the focus on this idea of the channels that we're developing in All 4 for me is all about creating a whole new bunch of brands that I hope people are going to end up loving. So that's basically what I do.
So maybe you could tell us a little bit, why do we need brands kind of, when we're talking about programs?
Yeah, so at the moment, when you go to All 4, we've got, I don't know, I'm just 10,000 different shows or episodes or 10,000 hours or whatever it is. And that's just a vast number of shows, and it's a huge amount of abundance. And most research you see is that viewers can usually only remember like 2 or 3 shows are connected to a channel. And the idea is that to try and start to bring shows together so that they start to form a brand, you can basically create a brand above them. And that's the thing that we want the user to remember. So if they're only going to remember 3 things about Channel 4, they remember the brand, as in the sort of channel brand. So as an example, Walter Presents, I don't know if you know, it's a foreign language box set service that we have on All 4. So it's entirely acquired series from around the world. And you could have just launched all those shows individually, and but you'd have been dropping them into a library of a whole bunch of other things. By bringing this idea of Walter Presents over the top of it, you're making lots of individual shows add up to something more. And what we find is that the people who watch Walter Presents stick within that world and keep coming back over and over again. So essentially, Walter Presents has become a shortcut to a certain kind of a sort of feeling and a certain type of programming that certain people will latch onto and they really enjoy. So it's just, it's what brands just offer something for the viewer to connect with ultimately.
So is curating linked to brand, or what's the relationship between the two things?
Well, a brand is a curator ultimately. A brand is not a product. This is my take on it. We often know them as being a particular product, but ultimately Nike is more of a kind of a feeling, and it's curating the world around it. Now it does that in order to sell you shoes or whatever, but it's fundamentally the idea of the brand is it's curating the world. So for me, that is what a brand ultimately is. Channel 4 as a linear isn't just for me the broadcast channel as in the thing that just keeps playing shows out back to back over and over time. It's more it's the thing that curates a certain type of programming and sort of means something to different people. With something like Channel 4, it's obviously such a such a big beast that actually there's different versions of Channel 4 depending on who you are. So my mum's version of Channel 4 is incredibly different to my version of it. But that's because a linear schedule allows you to be different things at different times. So when I was growing up, Friday nights was sort of the anarchic comedy part of the schedule. So that's what my version of Channel 4 was, and my mum's would have been probably Countdown or something like that. And that's ultimately what we're trying to mirror or reflect in all four, is that rather than just have a whole list of shows, we're sort of going, you know, these bunch of shows add up to this type of a brand, and these shows add up to this type of a brand, and then you put those brands together and you get what Channel 4, the sort of master brand, is.
I mean, now that you're dealing with kind of non-linear programming, is branding even more important?
I think so, yeah. I think it's the way you navigate around the world. I think we, you know, there's certain things that I return to over and over again to get either information or learn about the world. So, and we've all got our own versions of those, and it's also, you know, if you take something like The Guardian brand is also, it's just essentially made up of lots of other things, like, you know, individual articles, and it's when The Guardian adds all those articles up into being The Guardian, what you actually go back to is The Guardian. So it helps you kind of navigate around the world.
But I suppose that means an overall vision in order to be able to create that arc for all those different individual brandings and programs. I mean, how do you actually kind of communicate within the channel or for, kind of, you know, in order to create that overall vision for the main brand?
Yeah. So, what you mean, the all four brand or the sub brand? Well, like I say, so by creating these sub brands within it, you are, like I say, you're trying to essentially build 4 or 5 entities which are themselves substantial enough, and then, but they've all got their unique take on the world, or, you know, they kind of present themselves in a slightly different way, and effectively they're kind of we sometimes use this visual, or this, do you know the Pink Floyd Dark Side of the Moon album cover? So ultimately Channel 4, the beam of light firing in, at any one time, Channel 4, the broadcast channel, is only one thing, because it can only broadcast one thing. But as a brand, that's made up of loads of different elements, which is what the spectrum coming out is. So what we're trying to do is build within all 4 those brands that reflect the different parts of the spectrum, so that when you actually add them up together, they become the same as the beam of light, if that makes any sense. I don't know if I've explained that very well. But
it makes sense.
But yeah. And then, so when you're, in terms of bringing each of the individual brands to life inside all 4, they work almost like magazines. So at the moment, Walter Presents has 50 different shows. So when you watch a Walter Presents show, you get served a sting, so that tells you you're watching Walter Presents. But there's also this element where Walter introduces the shows. I was going to make a reference to the movie Drone, but probably people won't remember that. But he just kind of explains to you why he's chosen that song. He's watched 3,000 hours of foreign dramas over the years, but he's selected certain ones, and this particular show is one of those. So he explains to you a bit about that, and he references other shows that it's like. So he talks about Breaking Bad meets Boogie Nights. And then, so that's kind of giving you this sense of the curator that's sitting behind it. And then, so over the time, when we first started Walter Presents, there was only like 10 shows, so it was kind of okay. There wasn't that many shows to kind of navigate around. That's now built up to like 50, 60 different series. So now we're sort of going, each month Walter Presents will focus on a certain subject. So I think at the moment he's doing Friend and Foe, which is basically, there's 4 dramas that are all about people who used to be friends and now rivals or enemies or whatever. So he's now creating like a mini season within all 4, a collection in all 4 that plays to a certain theme. Next month we're doing a Scandi one, because we know there's a huge amount, there's a big audience out there who like Scandi drama. So so you get that extra sense of a curation going on, which brings his personality to life again. All the shows are still available. The 50 shows are in the background available, but we're just saying to you, right now, we're going to be this version of Walter Presents for you. And it's by doing that month after month, you hopefully, in the way that someone goes back to a newsagent and buys a magazine, I'm trying to get you to come back and go, this is this issue, and next month we're going to do that issue, and so on and so on. But all of those bits always, you've just got to remain absolutely true to what Walter Presents is. There's a very clear vision in our heads about what that brand equals, and how Walter would go about choosing stuff. So.
I mean, normally when we talk about branding, we think of commercial, we think about selling, advertising, etc.
That's marketing. That's not branding.
Okay.
And I don't like marketing. As in, so I used to do marketing, but the buying of posters and things like that it never really floated my boat. The bit I love is the branding bit, which is it's the bit that's trying to say this is what the personality of this entity is. It's the feeling it's trying to inspire you with and stuff like that. That's what the branding is. So, and that has lots of different elements of terms of the look and feel of it. And when we were launching Water Presents, so, you know, I was getting really pernickety about even just like tiny little sounds, just to make sure they felt like exactly the right kind of sound, because I knew that I wanted it to, there was basically versions that came through that felt very electronic, and I was like, no, this is a man sitting in his living room choosing these shows for you, so it can't be electronic and it can't be sort of industrial sounding, it has to feel, I'm useless at articulating myself, so I think I said it just have to sound organic. No idea what that actually means, but but it was basically you had to be able to hear him scribbling on a piece of paper. That's what it needed to ultimately sound like. It couldn't be like someone sort of slamming a door or whatever it would be. So yeah, so you kind of got the visual elements of it and the audio bits that come to life, but then it's also the sensibility, the way it then decides to curate things. So I can't think of it. He wouldn't do. He just wouldn't talk about things in the way that E4 talks about things. That's just not his style. He wouldn't sort of be that ironic and stuff like that. So there's the kind of it's what you actually see and feel, but then there's the way it behaves, as you know. And ultimately, brands they're kind of just you're trying to create a personality. That's fundamentally what they are.
So I mean, where do you start? Do you start with the branding first, and then somehow hoping that it will acquire kind of an audience for it, or do you actually have an audience in mind?
Yeah.
And you define the branding in relation to
Yeah, you define it according to the audience. So basically the journey we've been on this year, that sounded horribly American, didn't it? The journey. So we kind of launched Water Presents like a year ago, and we knew we wanted to do some more of those, but we basically have got this archive of shows, and there's so many sort of classic hits from the last 30 years, but you know, we wanted to help people discover them again. So because of all the data that we get about viewing habits and things like that, we were able to look at them and basically try and, we found audience groups who seemed to have similar tastes, so they were sort of watching similar kind of shows as each other. They weren't necessarily defined by their demographic. Like I say, it was more about the kind of things that they went for, and we're trying to now work out why they go for those kinds of things. So, I don't know, does a Hollyoaks viewer like true crime documentaries because they like crime, or because they like sort of tabloidy kind of language? So we're sort of playing around. Anyway, so you work out who your audience group is, and then look at the shows that they watch, and you can't curate based on all those shows, but if you can find little pockets of it and you go, well, actually those shows feel like they come together to become this kind of a brand, and then you start to go, well, if that brand was to exist, how would it talk about itself, and where are you trying to get it to? So one of the other channels it's aimed at young male gamers. So we don't really have any gaming program right now. We don't have authority to launch a gaming show, because what does Channel 4 know about gaming? I shouldn't say, might edit that bit out. But we have got a load of comedies which get viewed on consoles. So things like Peep Show, In-Betweeners, Father Ted, they get viewed on consoles. And my guess is that what's happening is that people are sort of playing a game for like 3 hours and they want that half-hour break, but they don't want to invest in a like 7-hour or 7-season long series. So they just dive into a sitcom where they know they can just pick and choose an episode here and there. So anyway, so you're sort of going, right, we've got that audience group over there, we've got the shows over here, we know where we want that thing to get to. So to get the authority to sort of play in the gaming world, we're going to present and curate those shows, but using the sensibility and the vernacular and the grammar of the gaming world to explain them. So, you know, I start to picture, if we're trying to sell a Mitchell and Webb collection, we do it Mitchell versus Webb, and it's all designed to look a bit like Street Fighter and all that kind of stuff. So we're using the gaming world to inspire the way we talk, because we know we want to eventually get into that space. And hopefully by doing that, the viewers will start to go, yeah, Channel 4 gets this world, they get me, so we get the authority to be able to do that in the future.
So you can't do anything until you get your audience, really. So what's your strategy for your audience?
Well, so I guess, we're lucky in one sense that we inherit a huge amount of shows and therefore audience as a result of the linear channel. So people coming in to catch up on what was on Channel 4.
Does the audience follow the program?
Well, as in we get, a huge part of our viewing is done to catch up programming. So it's not necessarily, we can't identify an individual viewer from that show to that show, to, watching something on linear to watching it on all four, but you could look at it and go, well, I don't know, this person's only watched episodes 1 and 6 of Made in Chelsea on all four. You could probably assume that they watch the other 4 on telly. So you can't, but it's more that just, our history, and most people probably think we are still a catch-up service, and therefore they come to us with that in mind. They put us in their heads alongside iPlayer and ITV Hub. What we're trying to do is get them to a place where they start to think of us more like Netflix or Amazon, because we have got that library. So anyway, we inherit an audience naturally as part of what Channel 4 is doing. But then what we're trying to do now is by creating these collections and these brands, and when we commission into them or acquire into them, we're looking for shows and ideas that we think can play out into the open platforms like Facebook and YouTube, and tell that audience that we've got something that they want on all four, and then when they get there, it's part of a collection, so they then start to watch more shows from us. So, yeah.
I mean, in the old days, as a filmmaker, when I wanted to pitch an idea to one of the commissioning editors, it was fairly straightforward. I had a name, I knew what kind of interest, what the brief of that person had.
Yeah.
But now, kind of, how do we come to you? I mean, it feels like a very kind of hidden name.
It's more, we get submitted ideas all the time, but I guess sort of the thing I'd sort of, you need to understand what a broadcaster is trying to do in the first place. So effectively, if I'm trying to sort of create these channels inside all four, when an idea gets pitched to me, I kind of have 3 questions that go through my head. Firstly, does it fit with one of the channels, or could the idea be made to work within one of those channels? If we got,
would you ask that?
because if it's not doing that, then it's not really it's not helping grow the business ultimately. So and also because that means I can get an audience to it. If it doesn't fit inside one of those channels, then the danger is, or the risk is, you're trying to launch a single thing in a world of abundance, and that's incredibly hard. So by saying it can work into one of the channels, it means I can get an audience to it, hopefully, and it's also doing something to reinforce that brand and help that brand grow and expand. So that's question number 1. Second question is, do I think this can bring in an audience to all four? So what is it about the commission that we could do, or it already has a part of it, which means that we can leverage it off platform and make noise around it, which helps get people to the door? And then the third bit is, what have I got to curate it with? Because it could be that it fits really well with the brand, but if we can't curate it alongside 3 other shows, it's going to struggle to kind of find, we're not going to be able to do what we need to be able to do with it, or it's not going to, we won't have the shows to tell people to go on and watch. So those are the kind of 3 sort of checks that I sort of go through in my head to decide whether I think something's got legs or not. But the actual process of how ideas come to us, we have contact details on the website, so people can submit ideas via that. Normally, people come to us with a production company on board. So that's quite important, just to help nurture the idea and all that kind of stuff. So, but we're kind of an open door. But we obviously get a load of ideas and treatments sent to us all the time. So, to stand out, you need to almost have in mind what is it that the broadcaster might get out of it, or why is this even right for this for Channel 4? So.
But I mean, it's completely open kind of brief. I mean, you're looking at drama, you're looking at series, you're looking at whatever, cooking programs,
Yeah.
anything kind of, which means that you're going to have an awful lot of people knocking at your door.
Yeah, but I think those 3 questions are actually quite a really strong filter to kind of reduce that down in terms of, that's quite hard to tick those 3 boxes. So, yes, the actual brief is open, but if it can't, like a food program for E4, I'd be like, well, I don't know what else I can put a food program for E4 on. So that's quite, that makes that one a bit hard. Now, do I want to make food programs for E4 in the future? Well, I mean, maybe, but we're going to have to somehow earn our way to that point. At the moment, it would sort of sit on its own in isolation. So yeah.
So would you be having dialogues with other commissioning editors around specific proposals?
Yeah, I mean, my vision for these, or our vision for these verticals or channels, is that they need to be absolutely sort of multimedia. So they need to have they need to exist on the linear channel. They need to exist off platform, so YouTube and social, and they need to exist on all four itself. So, because a brand is basically amphibious in that kind of a way. So I'm constantly talking to the other commissioners to see what is it that they've got that can help work into that. So, because like I say, a big part of what those curations are going to in part be based on what the linear channel is telling the world all four is, or channel 4 is doing at that moment in time, and is creating an audience for us that's coming into all four. So if trying to think if First Dates was on last night, then we know there are people coming to all four who like First Dates. So if we had a curation that worked off the back of First Dates, then we've got a good chance of getting viewers to it. Likewise, but if we can also find a way for that to bring audiences from who aren't currently looking at the linear channel or coming to all four, then we get two groups of audiences coming in.
So would it make more sense to go to commissioning editors first?
Oh yeah, don't come to me, I don't know. No, in the sense, like I say, I'm not, my commissioning editors are the people, they're in charge of the editorial. Mm-hmm. What I'm trying to do is make all those editorial decisions add up to a brand. So, like I said at the start, I'm not a program maker. So that's not to say you can't contact me, but it's just, I would immediately, if an idea came to me, I'd be like saying, talk to my commissioning editors, because they're ultimately the ones who need to make that, the sort of work out and come to me with a proposal as to how that show will sort of tick all those boxes.
Now I'm still trying to articulate kind of how Channel 4, all four, kind of E4, kind of all those fours kind of are working together and separately.
So you come to the All 4 homepage, and this is the point at which it is being curated according to the user. So I am signed in, so All 4 knows that I'm in a particular taste group. So the reason I've been served some of these is because the person at the other end knows something about me. So, but there are plenty of other people who have seen the same thing. So that's usually just telling you what our big priorities are right now. But then as you go down the page, we start to introduce the idea of these collections. So we get past the kind of algorithmically generated ones, and you start to get into things like this. So Funny Freshers is, so E4 Presents is one of the channels that we're creating, just because the E4 brand is incredibly strong, but it doesn't really exist in the All 4 world currently, but that's what we're trying to do. So Funny Freshers was just, we've got 4 shows, two of which pretty much everyone will have heard of. Teachers, my generation have definitely heard of that. I don't know if younger viewers will know of it, but they'll know Andrew Lincoln. Do people know Teachers? Wait. Is that it? Exactly. I'm glad. So anyway, Teachers, incredibly brilliant, very funny drama from when I was 18. Andrew Lincoln, obviously Walking Dead. So what we're trying to do here is basically say, because you like Fresh Meat and In-Betweeners, there are 2 other shows we think you might like, which is Teachers and Mr. Student Body President. Mr. Student Body President is an American show. And so then you've got the E4, and I'll go to it in a minute, then that will take us off to the E4 page. So, but if you continue down the page, we've got another channel sort of working its way, but it's not quite a brand as such yet, but this Documentaries one. So we had a Queen Victoria doc on All More for a couple of nights ago, so we're trying to use that to lead people into a docs space. Here you've got Walter Presents doing his thing, so using this kind of visual device as a shortcut to try and say friends torn apart kind of thing. And again, you can dive off to see Walter Presents. So effectively, as a viewer, you're hopefully being served in amongst curations that the team are doing, which are based on the user. So things like True Crime is there to try and tap a certain audience group. You've got these channel brand ones coming in. And then so then you get to a page which is the E4 Presents page, and that's where effectively this month's magazine is the Funny Freshers one. But then if you scroll down, you start to see other ones that E4 has done in the past. So the Bonkers Guide to Love, Celebs Just Doing Stuff, a collection around nips, tucks and tats. So those start to make, that's where E4 is coming to life. So you're basically taking people from a homepage, which has been curated for them. So in the future, not everyone would be getting the E4. My mum won't see E4 Presents. She'll definitely see Walter Presents, and she might see other ones. So they come together on the homepage like that, and then you take people off, and they can delve into those worlds. What I'm trying to do, ultimately, by creating this brand, is get people to start coming back to this and thinking, I want to go to E4 Presents this month because I want to see what's going on. It's Saturday morning, I'm in that kind of a mood, so E4 usually taps, or fits into that kind of mentality, so I'm going to go to that space. Rather than kind of going, I'm going to go to Netflix. It's basically what I'm trying to do. So then, does that explain a bit? Yes. And then what we're looking at the moment is then when you start to watch, if you press play on something, how do we use that? The moment you're watching, we've got, that's when we've got your undivided attention really. You're absolutely focused on the screen. So again, we're looking at the ways that we reinforce that, the idea of E4 Presents in that world. So in the linear world, you get continuity and so as in, the guy who speaks before a show starts to say what's coming up, and he speaks at the end to say what's coming next. So we're looking at bringing that kind of that sort of personal touch into this world, which is quite hard to do on an on-demand basis because everyone's watching loads of different things at the same time, but we think we've worked out how to pull it off. So we're going to try to sort of introducing that kind of an idea into this world. So again, it kind of dials up this sense of it being an actual human curated thing rather than a kind of just technology generated piece.
Can't trust the viewer to just find their own material.
No, but it is. It's like, I find it incredibly hard. Like, in a world of, with so much stuff going on, I need things or people to help me discover stuff. And yeah, and Netflix and Amazon go down that very technologically driven approach. So the algorithm, but that's just not, we're never going to be able to compete with them on that level because they've got way more money to invest in that kind of thing. But also it's not quite true to Channel 4's original spirit. We've always been like human curators. So we're trying to find a blend which takes data and what we know about the viewer, but add that human element on top of it. So, effectively what we're doing here is because you watch this, you might want to watch this, but we're doing it in hopefully a creative, interesting way rather than just serving it as an algorithm. So, does that help?
Yeah. So, here we get into the future kind of program makers.
Yeah.
So, how do we kind of direct their way of thinking, their approach to filmmaking in order to feed into what you're trying to do?
Well, it's kind of like, it's probably easier if we if you've got questions for me, because it's quite hard to answer that. It sort of depends on individual, and it also depends where you want your work to go, really, because I think the most important thing is you've got to try and work out, who is basically the partner, the brand, the publisher that you can work with to help get your shows out there. And that's the point where, so if you're bringing an idea to Channel 4, you need to have looked at it and gone, I want to be this kind of a filmmaker, and this is effectively, you've all got brands, that's what you're trying to do. You may not think of it in that term, but I'd argue that's what you're ultimately trying to do. And you're trying to blend that with a channel brand or a publisher brand, but you need to think about which publisher matches and mirrors with yours. So, if you take like YouTube vloggers, they've obviously each got their own channel and they're doing their own thing and they've got their own sort of brand personality, and they can collaborate with each other to help swap audiences and sort of help each other grow. But they can only do it with certain ones who share a similar sensibility, so that when they merge those two brands together, it makes sense to the viewer. If they went off with someone who had a completely different perspective on the world, it would just be a fucking car crash, basically. So you've got to think about who the publisher out there essentially can help you out, but also you can help them out. So, like I say, as all four, we're trying to grow these brands inside the thing, so they've got a very clear proposition and things like that. So you should only really bring an idea to us if you think we're good for you and that you can be good for us.
Well, that's us, kind of, you know. So, yeah, Jim?
I have a sort of slight concern about the idea that what you're doing is reinforcing kind of these boundaries between what people watch.
Yep.
And I have it kind of troubles me in this world when we should be looking outwards and not looking inwards.
Yep.
And this, to my mind, is reinforcing the differences between people, the separation between people.
Yeah.
And what if we as filmmakers come to you and we have to look at your brands and we have to look at what you're doing, are we then having to step into that world too? Well, we've got to make something that is just going to be for this generation or that generation or this type of person or that. Is this not a dangerous way to go, or am I being completely naive?
No, I can sort of understand where that comes from. So first off, our whole mission is not to do that. Our job, we're here, we have a remit to make sure we're championing alternative voices and broadening things out. But you've still got to you need a way to get people to watch that kind of a show. So if we just kind of took something that didn't fit into this kind of approach, then how do we even get someone to discover that piece? Does that make sense? So I'm not siloing anyone in this. I'm not saying that if you come to all four, you're only going to see this.
But you're going to get channels down this route, you're not. If you watch this and this and this, and you watch that and that.
No, but the point is a brand is satisfying a different mood for different people at a time. So there are times, I love Celebs Go Dating, but I also love the Vietnam War on iPlayer. So as a view, all I'm trying to do is help you get to a place where if you're in the mood for Vietnam War, there's this thing we've created an entity over here which serves that mood, that feeling. But if you're in the world for Celebs Go Dating, you can kind of find it over here. I'm just trying to help you navigate the world and get to those places. But as a viewer, when you land at all four, I'm not trying to say only go to this world. I'm just offering up a world which will satisfy you at a certain time. Does that?
So I suppose I'm slightly biased because I'm slightly older as well, but it troubles me social media as well.
But this is just one example of one of the things we're doing. We've got a docs channel in mind. So, and the whole purpose of that channel is to open the minds. But the other part of all of this is like with the docs channel, I'm sort of thinking about what are the things that we need to commission to help new audiences discover this stuff that they don't know exists. That I've got documentaries in mind for the last 15 years, which I absolutely adore and I love to bits, but other people just don't know they exist. So I'm trying to think about how can I help you discover that in the first place. But in order to do that, you've got to package up and curate in a way that helps the viewer find their way through that thing. And also trying to find links between these different channels so that if you've come in for E4, I can find a way to also introduce you to this thing over here. So if you take something like Dead Set, which was an E4 show, a sort of zombie drama written by Charlie Brooker. That was originally commissioned as an E4 show and can play perfectly into this world. But I also think as a mini-series, it's got an attribute, as in it's a mini-series, as in it's 5 episodes long, you don't have to binge on it. So one of the other channels we're looking at is a mini-series type space. So trying to satisfy people who just want to, almost like reading it like a book over a weekend. So I can find a way to then connect E4 Presents via Dead Set to someone watching the States, which is completely going to open their minds up. So it's trying to find ways to sort of connect the dots that way. But you've still got to have brands, I think, to help people even get to that in the first place. Because otherwise the problem is that all the shows will just kind of, I'm just sort of throwing them out there and saying, you find it. And I'm trying to help people discover new stuff.
You mentioned Netflix. I only found all four platforms this week. I was just to see how similar it was.
Yeah.
And wide range of content on there. And I was kind of flicking through categories. I couldn't find a documentary category.
Yeah.
Is there like a sort of definition for documentary film in Channel 4, or
So there is,
would that category fit into, would those films
So-
fit into documentary or?
So documentary is currently, when it comes to the categories, it falls under factual, but we're kind of aware that's kind of like an internal way of describing rather than, words like factual and factent and formats aren't things that the viewer necessarily understands, but we've seen in research that viewers also call First Dates documentary or 24 Hours in an E documentary because they don't know what to quite call it because it's not comedy, it's not drama. So hence why there's this kind of factual category. But one of our things, so when I define documentary, I'd probably say it's fuck knows what it is. Normally, I jump to my head of saying it's a one-off film, like a 60-minute piece like My Son the Jihadi or something like that. But then I think Murder Detective is also documentary, but I don't think First Dates or 24 Hours in E is quite documentary, although it kind of is. So what we're trying to do is almost like create a channel which is designed to serve up a space that can do the kind of one-off interrogation of a particular subject matter, and then we'll find other ways to serve up other kinds of documentary. But what we're trying to do is not give it a traditional name like documentary or factual format or whatever. So we'll find something else but I think in my head documentary is sort of, I don't know, it's like true stories, it's real life. But you can't but then other things are real life, but they're fictionalized in a way. So I don't know, it's hard.
There's a bit of reflection in it.
Yeah. But again, that's why it's about, for me, it's trying to find the brand entity which you just understand what its perspective on the world is, or the kind of things as it's trying to share, so that I don't have to try and label something in one way or another as a genre. I'm labeling it as a sort of outlook on the world, a sensibility instead.
I mean, those series, I don't know, kind of first dates or whatever, I mean, that's entertainment using reality.
Yeah. Well, I think that's what.
You're looking for the meaning of life into that. You just kind of, looking at.
Yeah. So I think, I think that maybe the word reality is the word that the audience would probably use to describe first dates, but it's one of those ones that's just the viewers are confused. And they certainly don't understand the internal language that we use to describe different pieces. But so again, for me, I'm trying to find a sort of brand sensibility that can override and kind of articulate itself to. So for me, maybe a documentaries channel is sort of it's sort of aimed at the inquisitive mind, is ultimately it. So it's trying to find a way that kind of describes itself in that context. So we've got a documentaries channel or vertical that's gone live. So it sort of looks at it tries to curate it into subgenres or particular subject matters. The thing is, we're trying to currently work out what to describe that thing at the top is and what the kind of curating principles of it are. So if it's a magazine, then I don't know whether you would kind of describe something on, you kind of go the true crime edition, but maybe it needs to look at a particular subject matter. So if you want to deep dive into this space, you would kind of go into so it'd find its curating principle based on that. But it's quite a hard one. But as a page, this has quite a lot of breadth within it. But we're just trying to work out what its next stage. But also, again, like I said, we're trying to find ways for that to connect into other spaces. So when you've got a drama like The State, that actually fits quite neatly with documentaries that we've got about Islamic State. So actually, maybe the thing we need to do is get the viewer from The State into that, rather than saying, here's just the drama space. You're kind of going, here's a drama, and here's, essentially you're trying to reflect the idea of someone going in a wormhole where they're watching a drama about a particular subject, and then they end up Googling the subject matter on their phone. So maybe there's a way to kind of take people off in that kind of way, which is a way that we would shine a light on all these documentaries which people don't know exist. So we're using a big drama to introduce them to this other world, which then takes them off to this world where they can explore more documentaries.
Just to carry on kind of the Netflix, I mean, as a producer, I mean, for me, going to Netflix kind of seems to satisfy my budget better, but also definitely kind of in terms of the creative documentary, having the freedom to make a 90-minute or 100 minutes or whatever, one-off kind of documentary to explore more in depth some specific kind of issue or situation, etc. I mean, they're very much offering that to filmmakers. I mean, do you think that one day you will kind of move that way?
Can you explain how you think they're offering that?
Well, I mean, they go to documentary markets, talk to producers, go to pitching forums, etc., and literally commission saying, yes, kind of, I like kind of this idea.
Yeah, but that's what Channel 4 does kind of all the time anyway. So
they used to, but no, not so much. I mean, the presence of Channel 4 in commissioning forums is very limited, reduced. Which it is interesting. I mean, it's very kind of different.
Yeah, I mean, I sort of we're out and about all the time, going to commissioning forums. So, and that's what we, as a business, we have to be out there looking for ideas. So, in a way, I think we are doing that. So I don't quite.
Well, share the same kind of forums. But
no, but whether we're commissioning the kind of thing that you think we should be commissioning is a different matter.
No,
but that's
I think there's room for commissioning many different things. But I suppose, I mean here, because we talk more about creative documentary, Netflix would be more kind of fitting. Yeah.
But ultimately, I mean, I've never worked at Netflix, but I believe what's happening behind the scenes is they're looking at the data they've got on viewers and who watches different things together. So, House of Cards probably came about because they knew that they had a group of audiences that liked David Fincher and that liked Kevin Spacey and liked political dramas, so they ended up going for that show. So I don't think they're just out there saying, we'll commission anything. They're applying a similar kind of thought, I'd have thought. I bet.
They seem to be manoeuvring between, I suppose, kind of commissioning films who become big hits.
They're definitely branching out more into the factual space, having been traditionally in the scripted space. So absolutely, they're branching out into that. But for me, we are there to do a similar kind of thing, as in we're also commissioning that kind of stuff, and we've got a long heritage of history of it. So
they're sharing kind of the platform with festivals in a more, fluid way than I would say probably what the programs that you've got there. So somehow having films do well in cinemas and especially in festivals, then to be transferred onto Netflix seems to be quite a normal thing. We no longer seem to have that relationship here. We don't really have titles that we've seen in festivals or in cinemas. I mean, they're made, they go straight to your platform.
But that's because we're a TV company, I think, isn't it? But so we're not. So we've obviously got Film 4, which is commissioning documentaries as well, or has a feature, a sort of output arm is showing documentaries.
But again, Channel 4 used to kind of share a similar kind of path where films, documentaries will go out first in festivals and cinemas, and then be screened on broadcast.
But I can't. It's an area of the business that I'm not. I'm not sort of involved with.
I'm just interested in kind of those different models to see how kind of it fits. Kind of if you just kind of in terms of.
But that's kind of. I suppose ultimately what this comes back to is my point earlier about working out who are the publishers out there who are looking to do the things that you sort of have a shared vision as to what they want to do. So, just the way our business our model works means that, or certainly I'm looking for a certain kind of thing. You know, where that documentaries channel ends up going, I can't tell you as yet, but you know, we want to sort of grow it to become something significant. But I don't know whether the going via the festivals route is necessarily an approach that I would take. I'm not saying it won't, but I don't know whether it is.
I mean, back to in terms of branding, kind of, you know, usually films were kind of, you know, screened in festivals or, you know, cinemas kind of, you know, have a specific branding, which is more associated with cinematic kind of approach to filmmaking.
Yeah.
Very different kind of, you know, pacing in terms of editing, etc. So in the past, I mean, broadcasters managed to combine both. But here, we very much seem to be in a very television kind of set of aesthetics.
Well, yeah, I mean, I can only talk about the kind of stuff. I don't know if
Yeah,
so I'm not being
my
involved.
question is kind of, you know, for example, I mean, is it something that you want to remain in this approach, in this form of aesthetics, or is it kind of, you know, something that, you know, a different cinematic, you know, documentary would have possibilities also or for?
I think it could, but I suppose what I'm having to do is work with what the library we've got available now.
Yeah.
So basically that documentary channel is based on the stuff that we've got in the library. So making sense of that, and then where that thing ends up going, I don't know yet, because we're sort of we'll be testing over the coming years what kind of things that audiences will, but ultimately if audiences currently are coming to All 4 for a certain kind of thing, then it's about serving that and then nurturing that to become to where we want it to be. I guess in the same way I was saying the kind of description I was giving for the gaming thing. So we're working with the archive content we've currently got, and then working out how do we frame that and position it and develop it out to be able to do the thing that we want. We've got to do the same thing with documentary. We've got to work out by curating it in certain ways. We've only just launched that channel, so I don't know which of these subject matters are going to bite. So as we see what people sort of go for and what the stretch is, we can then start to move and do different things. We'll also be talking to Film 4 and trying to work out what's the Film 4 presence in this world. But I guess ultimately one of the challenges, you've got to have a large enough volume. If we wanted to do a kind of cinematic documentaries thing in All 4, we'd need to get a volume of it for it to become something that we're known for. And that's not something you can just do overnight. Does that help answer?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think volume is really important.
So again, it's sort of, a brand can't be made up of just one or two things. It's got to be, you've got to own that right. And so, if we want to start hosting that stuff on All 4, we've got to let the audience know that we've got something of that, that scale. So I guess going back to the Walter thing, that kind of only, we could have just launched, at the very start, if we'd have just launched one international show and branded it as Walter Presents, no one would know what that thing is. We started off by saying, here's a dozen shows, those things add up to Walter Presents, and then we've built up to 50. So you've got to launch with something of scale, which is why you can't launch any of the channels that we're thinking. It's very hard to just launch them with commissions alone, because it's very, you can't launch a TV channel with, E4 when it first launched was made up of first runs of Channel 4 shows and acquisitions that it got from America and repeats. And then over time, it became a channel that was almost, commissioning a huge amount of stuff for itself. But to get to that place, you've got to start with kind of content you can get to.
I mean, traditionally, kind of, broadcasting was all about programming, where you had kind of, set shows and set times. But, now it's all about curating.
Yeah.
So, in a way, I mean, it's, trying to think from, the point of view of as a filmmaker.
Yeah.
Where do we fit? How do we kind of maneuver kind of, this, this curating kind of business? Because it's no longer the filmmaker proposing, I'm doing this for this audience for such a time. It's actually you, kind of, as a curator, who's now organizing.
But I think, so in a way, this kind of micro-curations of doing things in 4s is kind of, and the reason we're doing that is we're trying to replicate what happens in the linear world. So the idea of sort of scheduling a 9 p.m. doc after a thing at 8 o'clock, which you knew was going to deliver this kind of an audience, then a scheduler was having to make that decision and was deciding the best way to get viewers to watch that documentary is to put it after this show because they share a sensibility. If you'd have put it after, I don't know, some kids programming, it would have died a death. So a scheduler was having to think in that kind of a way anyway. But even within all of that, I would have thought that a sort of producer or filmmaker would be having to look at Channel 4 as a broad thing and saying, well, does this show play into the brand sensibility of Channel 4 as a broadcast channel? So whilst you wouldn't necessarily think I'm doing it to sit at that in that one single slot there, it would have to tonally fit with what Channel 4 tends to do anyway.
Yeah.
So
Think of the style.
yeah, so it's sort of like saying, think with these channels, it's sort of saying that is the way, that's what that zone channel feels like. And then by seeing the sub-curations, you start to understand the different ways it will curate kind of stuff. And therefore you can think, well, does the documentary or the idea I've got play into that world or not? Because if it doesn't, we're not doing each other any favours at all, because I can't help you find an audience and you can't help me find an audience. So we're not kind of working together in a harmonious way. And there's probably someone else out there who could do that job for, would be a much better partner. So ultimately what we don't want to do is, from our perspective or your perspective, is put a show on all four and then not even get, or struggle to get viewers to it, because then that creativity hasn't seen the light of day. So we kind of, it's a partnership working together to try and do that.
So, Charlie, maybe you can tell us a little bit about how you work with the filmmakers that you're kind of trying to bring on board.
So I don't, like I said, I'm not the one directly working with filmmakers, but my team are out there. So I guess one of the ways that you could help a show find an audience or an idea find an audience is to think about how it exists off open platforms. And I wonder if for us to help new talent emerge, rather than kind of diving in and going, here's the half-hour, 60-minute thing that's going to sit on all four, we start to think, well, for these brands to be amphibious and live off loads of different platforms, we need content to make them exist on YouTube and social media or whatever. So maybe one of the ways to nurture talent and formats and ideas is to play into that space off platform and then use that ground to kind of ultimately develop. So, and what that does for us as a brand is help us, it gives us a life off platform, so that reinforces the brand and helps people understand what we mean, but also gives us a chance to nurture ideas in a way that allows us to eventually put them on all four or move the thing across all four. So as a kind of maybe I'm not explaining that very well, but as an example, we've got a show called Rage Room launching on Monday, which is it's a bit like Room 101, if you know that show, where people who've got some kind of grievance with the world come into the Rage Room and in front of Russell Kane and a celebrity guest kind of rant about the thing that they're annoyed about, and if they're successful, they get to go into a Rage Room and basically smash up the thing that they're annoyed with. But when you take that idea, you can break it down into its core parts. Is watching someone rant about the world an interesting thing to watch? Do people want to see that kind of thing? So we could have just basically taken bits of that and put that on YouTube to see whether people responded well to that. If they share it, then that tells us that particular bit of the idea can work. Then the other bit of it is the smashing up of the Rage Room. So does that, by filming that and putting that out there, does that generate interest or not? And if you get those two bits flying, then you can bring them together into the actual program idea. Then by introducing the celebrity guests and all that, you're finding another way to sort of bring audiences to that. So you're trying to find ways to kind of test out an idea and develop it over time, so that you ultimately build an audience desire for that thing.
So how long does this testing go on for?
It sort of depends on the idea and whether you want it. So, and obviously, what I'm here, that example I'm using is I don't know if you're very particularly sort of traditional documentary filmmaking, or whether it's more broadly TV creativity, like as in.
I think they're more traditional documentary.
Yeah.
So they are young viewers.
Yeah, yeah.
So I'm sure they're consumers of what you produce.
Yeah, so it sort of depends, you know, if you kind of did a test, if you could put a test out there, and if you got an immediately very strong feedback, then that gives you the confidence to sort of go on and take that to the, you know, take it forward. But what you might find is you get a lukewarm response. So then you go, okay, well, how do we improve on that? And how do we sort of test, you know, take it to, you know, we've all, in the history, you know, TV's always created kind of development pots and pilots and things like that. What we're trying to think about is how do we do that in a way that where we actually get information from the audience that helps us make that to the best it can possibly be. How long that takes will depend on the idea and what, you know, what needs to be developed.
I was wondering if there's some sort of proven strategies from previous iterations and eras of All 4 and Channel 4 that you find are not necessarily true in this more modern context, in this land of plenty, as you've spoken before. Is there anything that was true in the past for the company that isn't so much true anymore?
Well, I guess the thing that I have learned over the last 2 years, it has been this thing about, I've seen great ideas that I think we've made some sort of really strong shows, or acquired some really strong shows, but because we weren't able to do this curation thing, they just didn't find an audience. So we made a documentary at the start of the year with SBTV about the rise of grime, and I think it's a really strong documentary, but because we couldn't do the job of curating it, it couldn't find an audience. Now I think as a niche, it's ultimately a niche kind of subject matter, or, you know, music documentaries themselves are quite, you know, you don't get a huge amount of views themselves, and then you're also doing it about a particular genre of music. But I actually believe that essentially what the internet or digital does is it thrives on niches, that actually people love the idea of coming to somewhere that's kind of got, it kind of fits their sort of taste or outlook or whatever. So I think the internet and digital is about niches fundamentally, but they're making those niches big. But basically the problem was that with that one show, because it was the only thing of its kind that we had, people didn't sort of come to it to find it. So I think that's been the biggest thing for me. In terms of what I've learned is just a great idea doesn't automatically mean it will get a huge amount of viewers. What we're trying to do is find a way to allow great ideas to get a number of viewers, and with that, our strategy is based on this kind of channels and curations to be able to get to that place.
What's one of the best techniques or strategies that you've come across in your time in the industry for marketing a product, television or film-related content?
I mean, it's a bit of a cliche, but and it's the kind of slightly, but word of mouth is the most important or the most powerful thing I think you can sort of kind of create. But it's also incredibly hard, and like the amount of meetings, and it, you know, it's just like sort of cliche in the advertising world of someone going in going, I just want a viral. But what the fuck is a viral? So again, like I was saying earlier, like for me, trying to find a commission that in itself, the process of making that commission will create stuff that can fly and tap into basically social media, because if I can get a reaction out of someone on social media or on YouTube or whatever that leads them to share and pass that on, I think that's always going to end up being more powerful than, say, a big poster. But they're very hard to get right, which is why you also have big posters to try and do a job for you as well. So, but I fundamentally believe that the power of the word of mouth to get something out there. So it's trying to find things that can deliver that.
Your E4 channel online is you can see the brand through it quite obviously, and the same almost with All 4 just generally.
Yep.
But your documentary page that you just showed just now is
Yep.
quite eclectic.
Yep.
And of course, we all know that you can have so many different types of documentary that would fall under different branding strategies.
Yeah.
Because you've just launched now, do you have a branding strategy for the next 6 months or year?
So, like I said, basically the documentaries one is one of those. So we can do E4, in the way that because we know what E4 is and we know how it's grown itself over 15 years. With the documentaries one, we're essentially using the platform, and the reason we haven't given it a proper brand name yet is because we're not quite sure ourselves what is exactly the right proposition that's going to get the most sort of interest. And so in a way, yes, it is eclectic, but we're going to be using that to try and finesse it and work out what is the right approach for that. So I think I don't have a sort of time scale as to, but you know, my hope is that within 6 months we can do something that's much more clear and defined in what its sort of curating principle is.
Yeah, so you're just going to sit on your current docs that you've got on there because you can't bring more out without varying it down a certain route, if you know what I mean?
So what you can do is play around with the curation. So that page is ultimately made up of, I don't know what there was, like 8 or 10 collections within it. And you can they constantly slice and dice different things. We can bring out stuff from the archive, you know, stuff that we don't currently have the license for, but see if we can get it back. We can acquire shows into it to try and push and test and see what is the most, what's getting the most response from people and which one feels like it's tapping into a particular mindset that the viewer has. And ultimately all of these are about the context that the viewer is choosing to watch something in at a given moment in time. And that's ultimately what all these different brands are trying to do. So sort of going back to that point, the question earlier about what are we siloing? Well, we're sort of siloing to a context of viewing, a mood in which you view, but that, as humans, we have lots of different contexts in which we want to try and view. So we're just trying to work out what's the positioning for that channel, which taps into a context which is shared by a broad number of people.
Yeah, so if you're receiving documentary treatments just now,
yeah,
would you be postponing a response to kind of gauge where the channel is going?
Well, so in terms of what all four would actually do, I think, and also I'd postpone, but I'd probably want to be clear as to go, have we got something that it sits against? And, you know, I'd start with a bit about the curation. Channel 4 itself is constantly commissioning documentaries for the broadcast channel, and all four is ultimately going to inherit that kind of thing. So I think the kind of think about Channel 4 as an overall company that's doing is commissioning lots of different things. So we are constantly commissioning documentaries. In terms of what fits into what as a department all four might commission, I would probably want to understand a bit more about what is the right space to go down, what line to go down. But Channel 4 as a company is commissioning documentaries all the time. Does that help?
Yeah, so Channel 4, like documentary just now, they'll take it and then they would just put it either into the documentary section or into any of the other sections.
Well, they'll probably broadcast it on the channel. Yeah. As in, so there's basically a documentaries commissioning team who are dedicated to documentary and specialist factual, and their task is to essentially create for the linear channel. But we're in dialogue all the time about maybe if they had an idea that they weren't sure was right for the linear channel, but they ask if we think we could get it to work on all four, and I would go through that process of thinking, well, where does it fit? Does it have, what can it be curated with? And I think that would be the biggest thing. Whilst we're trying to finesse what that documentaries channel actually is just going, actually, do we think there's something, does that curate with a number of other shows so that we can at least put it on the homepage and try and get its audience that way?
If Channel 4, or all four, commissions a production company to make a doc,
yeah.
Where does the editing and formatting, who kind of guides that? Does the production company have quite a lot of control there, or is it quite sort of prescribed?
So no, it wouldn't be prescribed as such, but the way I sort of talk to my team about it is the job of the commission editor is to hold on to the vision as to really the context in which it's going to be viewed and so they're not getting into the prescription, trying to edit it for the producer or the filmmaker. I don't think that's what we're there to do, but we do have to ensure that the end result gets to a place that it can work for what, it works for the channel, it's got enough to get a sort of broad audience from an all-4 perspective that we can curate it into the, if we've got in mind that we're going to curate it alongside a certain number of shows, we need to ensure it remains within possible to do that. So I always say, like, if we're making notes, it should be more kind of like, how could you do this? Or, can it be made to feel more in this kind of a space? But it shouldn't be sort of saying, please change that thing at 2 minutes 03 and that at that and that. I don't think that's, hopefully we pose the question to the producer or the filmmaker for them to work out the solution to the question.
Or would you refer to other shows, for instance, to sort of... I personally do, because I find that an easy shortcut, because I can't always articulate, as you may have gathered, what I think, so I use other things as a shortcut to get me to that place, but I'm sure other commissioners are all different. There's not they brief differently, they respond differently, so they're each individuals, so there's probably not one set rule, but personally I do use reference points of saying there's this over here or whatever, so particularly with the curation kind of thing, I would be, if I know I'm trying to put it with a number of other shows, I'd be sort of trying to say, it needs to, this is the bit that's kind of problematic, or we need it to kind of play for a little bit more into this kind of space. It's not trying to say make it a replica of that thing over there. It's just saying it's trying to share some elements of that idea.
It's not an idea, but I just wondered, is it a fertile time for factual filmmaking, for documentary filmmaking? Is that part of the reason why this channel is potentially, this space is coming to existence?
What, the one on all 4? I think it's coming into existence because that's a big part of the Channel 4 brand. We've got a lot of it in the archive, but it's probably one of those bits that hasn't yet kind of found its place in on demand. And I think when we speak to viewers, they documentary is something they play back to us about what they recognise Channel 4 as offering, but usually a lot of the time, because they are one-off pieces, that's quite hard to get viewers to in an on-demand world. So the point for this channel is to kind of create a space which allows people to discover the stuff from the past and allows us to keep commissioning into it in the future.
Do you see there being sort of echoes in terms of what's happened in the past and that kind of pre-Victoria documentary, sort of linking that with things that are occurring now related to that subject? Will there be is that something that you kind of seek in terms of your commissioning?
As in, how do you mean exactly?
Commissioning programs, factual programs that relate back to your archive, things that...
No, well, I'm sort of more about, what I mean is like how, so we've got, the fact that we've got all of that in the library means that we've got the volume of content to be able to create something, and then, but it's not about the documentaries that we commission going forward to be about the subjects from the past. It's more, there's plenty of other things we've got which aren't Queen Victoria documentaries, so we've, things that look at the modern world and things like that. So again, for me, it would be more just working out, well, what are the pieces we can put together. So we haven't quite I don't think it's on the homepage anymore, but we had one on there which was, we couldn't work out the title for it, so I think it's now called Inspiring People or something like that, but for a while we called it Best Medical Docs. But you had shows like The Boy Whose Skin Fell Off, which, if you've never seen it, is fucking, it's the document. The documentary that it sticks in my head as a sort of pinnacle Channel 4 documentary. So anyway, we had that. We had a show, I think it's called Bring Me Back to Life. So that was a guy who'd, I think he'd been in a coma for a long period of time or something like that. And it's about, and ultimately these were kind of like medical marvel stories, but all done with a heart. They might use kind of the tabloidy title language to sort of get the click from the viewer, or the view from the viewer, but they're ultimately really heartwarming, inspiring pieces. So if we had ideas coming to us that played into that, we know we've got stuff in the archive that we can put it alongside and help it get people in. So, but like I say, it's all about that the page at the moment is trying to work out what are the different ways we can curate and pull things together and kind of tap into.
Would you trust your instinct on an idea over, say, the reputation of a filmmaker or a production company? Would you base your sort of risk assessment on an idea? Or?
So I think the most important thing is the idea, and if it was a new filmmaker who'd never done anything before, then we might suggest that they partner with someone who can give us the assurance that the idea the idea can see reality, basically. So I think, but fundamentally, the idea is the most important thing in the mix. But it's not. Yeah, it's just our job again is about, as commissioners, is to help make a vision a reality. So if we feel like that a filmmaker has the skills to just go off and do that himself, we let them do that. But it might be that we think, actually, you might need a mentor, you might need guidance, whatever, to help that thing become reality. And our job is to help people out, help get sort of people to that, to actually make that idea a reality, not to get in the way and sort of, make things difficult for people. We're fundamentally trying to get a great idea onto screen.
So thank you very much, Charlie, for kind of sharing all this kind of inside information.
Yeah.
And,
I hope it was helpful.
Well, you just never know.